Hey
No worries. Says it's live on my side.
everyone, that's not on mine yet, but you sure it says live on your side?
Yep. And there's like a little clock that's ticking.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Darshan Talks podcast. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. As you know by now, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So, if you ever think about drugs or wonder about medical devices, you consider cannabis, you obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. I would appreciate it if you would actually leave a comment, subscribe. It lets me know that you're listening. It tells me that these podcasts that we do are interesting to people. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's podcast is with our frequent guest, the president of Whitsell Innovations. We've referred to her as the legend. We've referred to her as the myth, but she is our guest today, Robin Whitsell. Hey, Robin, how are you?
Hey, Darshan, how you doing?
I have been good. Apparently, not as good as you because someone's just coming back from a wonderful vacation. So first of all, tell us why you had the vacation and what did you
Yes.
do?
So the vacation was actually a surprise. My husband and I were celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. So
Congratulations!
yeah, right. I mean, right. It went by so fast. It goes by in a blink. We
The
decided,
vacation or the
or
20 years?
all of it. We decided to return to St. Croix, which is where we got married 20 years ago. So that was really nice. And you know, we did this stuff like we went snorkeling and we played golf, which is something we do maybe once a year. So we're truly terrible, and have a good laugh. It's a lot of fun. But yeah. Anyway, and it was interesting. With St. Croix, you have to provide either a negative COVID test or proof of the antibodies in order to enter. They're doing that for the Virgin Islands. So it's really interesting, kind of not exactly the before times, but how so many regions are trying to get back on track. So
I imagine for a island destination that's based its entire economy on tourism, this must be a nightmare. How
yeah.
did the islanders treat you? Like, were they really
Oh,
welcoming, or was it please stay away?
no, it was everyone was really lovely. I mean, it's St. Croix is a beautiful island, and um, it's a U.S. in the U.S. Virgins, so it's a U.S. territory, and the locals. It seemed that they were just trying to adapt to what the rules are now, right? So even if you don't have to wear a mask if you're fully vaccinated, they want masks, or like whatever the rules are now. And I think they're like everyone else have been pivoting. What do they do? How do they keep their businesses afloat? How do they attract the folks that are visiting? Shockingly, though, it was really like the plane was full. People were ready to go to the islands, to go be entering a new time. I think people are
The
kind of
time after
tired
the
of.
time.
Yes, I think people are kind of tired of this. They're tired of,
Yeah.
and I guess, I mean, that just, I mean, in many ways just shows how lucky we are that this is where we are as a country. And I know other countries aren't there yet. So,
Yeah.
um,
So
anyway.
it's interesting to me though that you talk about that because one of the things people are talking about in the news is Japan, and they're
Mm.
talking about the Olympics there,
Oh yeah.
and how they're going. Really, just don't have the Olympics right now here. We'd really rather not. While the Olympics are going, no, we're going to have it here because we've been planning for this for a lot of years and a lot of money has gone into this. So, so to me, the difference. I wonder if it's that Japan's economy obviously doesn't depend on tourism as much as say the islands does. So I wonder if that's one of the distinctions, which I think is
Well,
interesting.
something else to consider though is Japan did a very early lockdown on the pandemic. So they
Mm.
didn't have nearly kind of the death rate here and the occurrence rate here, right? So they also don't have nearly the vaccination rate. So the vaccination rate in Japan is pretty low.
Is
So I
it?
can see why this introduces a great risk to their country because they didn't have sort of the incentive for everybody getting vaccinated. Whereas in the Virgin Islands, they were even talking about people would travel there, basically vaccination tourists, to try to get vaccinated.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
we had some really interesting conversations with people about um, and the Crucians,
Is that what they
everybody,
call
yeah,
Crucians? Okay.
yeah, everyone talks about that everyone's vaccinated and that everyone's on board, and it very much is kind of that concept of being in something together. Like they are very serious about vaccination and again, maybe to your point, that helps their economy reopen, but also I think they understand how fragile their healthcare system is, and they are doing their part in that way.
So I find it interesting though. You talked about people coming there for vaccinations, but I wonder. I remember this during COVID, and I'm sure you do as well. And I used COVID as if it's the past tense, and it's not.
Right.
But the idea that people were going on, and a lot of islands said, if you're willing to work here, we'll like waive a bunch of different requirements as long as you work remotely from these islands.
Huh.
And I wonder if a lot of that happened. Did you get a sense for that at all, or not? Not really.
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
what the folks that we encountered talked about kind of their level of the organization that went into these mass vaccinations, and it was it's interesting because it's island time. You could go to lunch and it's 2.5 hours later. And you might get your sandwich. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there's not a it's not a culture of urgency,
Right.
and yet when I heard from actually two different people about getting vaccinated, they talked about how organized it was and how regimented and how it was like military precision. It was impressive. Definitely. And I think too, this commitment for everyone that they wanted to protect their fragile healthcare system. It felt like, again, this concept of being in it together. But I mean, the island countries these are small islands, where I bet a lot of people. Like I bet you say, "Oh yeah, my friend Amy," and everyone's like, "Oh, I know Amy," but I'm exaggerating. But you get the feeling, like yeah. So I think that's interesting.
It's like a bigger version of Cheers where everyone knows your name.
Maybe.
So
But
let's ask a different version of that question. This was a milestone vacation for you. This
yeah.
was a milestone event in your life. Did you work?
Yeah, I mean, my husband, this was sort of an impromptu thing. So, and because it was so tough to get tickets, we actually were there a week, which is a lot of time to just kind of take off work. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I tried to be mindful about how much I worked, and it wasn't like I was on my phone all the time, connected to work all the time. I tried to like have windows of time where it's like, okay, I'll check in here and I'll check in here. But yeah, I mean, I
I
think.
guess. Mhm.
Well,
No, go
I
ahead.
mean, I think that's kind of part of modern life is like knowing how to pace those things.
I think that's exactly right. I feel like, especially when I worked as a pharmacist, one of the best parts of working as a pharmacist was you work from 7 to 3:30, and then you're done. No one's calling you, going, "What happened?"
Right.
You have a handoff and you move on. In industry, working in the life sciences industry, that is not the case. At least in the jobs that I have done, it's you're responsible for this project. I want to know where you are, what you're doing, how far you're getting along, and that's even more so when in your case you're actually running the company. So I just didn't know, was I wrong in thinking that there is a, for me at least, there's never been a natural sort of, oh, we're now on vacation, I don't pick up phone calls, and my girlfriend's just going, that makes no sense at all. If you're on vacation, why are you working? But
Well,
I'm glad to know that
yeah.
it's not just me.
Well,
Um,
I think for me, because I am running the company, and I don't want to create a bottleneck. That's just one of the parts of the job. Like I guess I signed up for. But I think for at least I hope for the other WIers, I hope they do disconnect more and completely. I hope they do, and we try to have people kind of find a buddy so they can hand off a project and go and and disconnect. And even me, like I played golf terribly. Have I mentioned how bad I am? And
Just a
it
little
was a
bit.
blast. And there were times when we didn't have connectivity, or where even if I wanted to work, I'm not working. So I mean, I think there is that something important about recharging your batteries and not always being all work all the time.
I 100% agree with you. I'm just curious, like how that matching of work life versus non-work life. And what I'm referring to is, I was recently, when I say recently, I guess literally 2 years ago at this point. Uh, feels like forever.
Time is hard. It's like
Yeah, I feel like
2020,
last
the
year
lost
still hasn't
year. Yeah.
happened. Yeah, you just don't count last year.
Yeah.
Um, but I was on vacation. I was literally in Pennsylvania, and we had I was just at a resort, worked all day. We're going out. I was getting ready to leave, and I landed up talking to someone, and I realized that I was pitching business to a guy who I met at the bar. Like, that just sounds so wrong, and
Oh,
yet
did you get a job?
actually, he did offer me some stuff. He asked if I wanted to buy his donut franchise. So,
Oh, oh,
so
maybe not.
I do food law as well. So
Uh,
it's kind of interesting when I was helping him with some concept, and he'd never heard of the concept of trade dress, and
mm.
I was telling him about that, and yeah, that. But my point being, work doesn't seem to leave my mind. I can't tell if that's a good thing or bad thing, or that's just normal now, and not just now, but forever. Like, do you? When was the last time you went a week without thinking about work?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough question. I mean, I think it speaks though to our industry, because even
Yeah.
when even before I started WI, I worked at startup. I worked at a large pharmaceutical company before that, and I worked at a CRO before that. And I'd say that there was never really kind of a time when I wasn't in some way kind of pulled in by my job, or some responsibilities like were pulled in.
Yeah.
Um, though maybe also it's that responsibility gene. Like I don't want to let people down, so that might be part of it too. But I think though there are, like I said, there are windows where it's not all work. There's windows where you've got to go to a different place mentally.
I agree, but now as we start getting from the before times into today, I love using that term before times. By the way, that's a Whitsell comment term, but I'm gonna go with it. I love it. So when you come from the before times and you start moving towards today, you hear about employees and you hear about contractors saying, "I'm not going to work for a company that doesn't give me my freedom." And on one hand, I love the concept of that, where people are saying, I don't want to report into work. I want to be responsible for the job, do the job, and sort of go down that path. But I also wonder if they know what they're asking for. In that, yes, for the last year we've done this, but do you really want a life where you are available 24/7?
Mm. Well, if we're talking about, and maybe we are, if we're talking about working from home,
Yeah,
that is a real and true concern.
yeah,
And I would say anyone who works from home needs to take a moment, like, because that's my entire company. We are all remote, and we need
hmm,
to take a moment to think about where we put those boundaries. Because
yeah,
I think that's where you court burnout. Um, if it's always the job, you're going to get burnt out. There's no way. And if I can take it back to medical writing and probably to your legal practice, if you're burned out, you're probably not doing your best work. So are
hmm,
you really bringing the value to patients that you want to bring?
yeah,
I have conversations with some of our clients about that, because oftentimes as companies go into a big submission, so right,
yeah,
they're going to write a new drug application, they're going to write a biological licensing application, and I say that because it's not like you're writing a book report. You're pulling together all of these different elements of what you've spent potentially the last decade
yeah,
working on. You're pulling it all together, right?
yeah.
There is this temptation to create a scenario that is a death march for everyone. I mean, it's an overwhelming, just it, and I try to advise our clients like, hey, there are ways to cross that finish line that are not going to kill you and all the people that you work for, and is creating that death march really doing your patients any favors? Because what if what you're delivering is now not your best work and you're not going to get an approval, you're going to get an approvable? You need to think about the consequences of those decisions. One of our ops managers that has the word planful, and I have completely have completely like glommed onto that word and stolen it. Though I will give like trademark Stephanie. But be planful. Think about sort of the sequence of doing things and doing things in the right sequence. Think about how if you want to speed things up, there are times when you need to move a lot slower, like thinking about your key messages, thinking about your strategy. Move slowly there, and then yeah, you can move faster downstream. So I think that's a part of our industry that we probably need to call out, because burnout does not allow you to do your best work.
So I think that sounds great as a universal truth. I'm agreeing with you. But now try
But
explaining that to a company with investors. Try explaining that to a company that's gone public and has its 10K or its 8K due in a few weeks. I imagine you've had more than your share of telling someone that I want to give you the best, and that may not be the fastest, but it's the best. How has that gone for you?
well, I think there's a couple things there, lots to unpack, right?
Okay.
And I think it's fair to say, how do you know this is true, right? I think it's a fair question to ask.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that we set out with the scenario that will get the project done, right?
Mhm.
And then we
Mhm.
talk about the things that will derail the projects, the risks. Like, hey, this is the risk, kind of the risk landscape. And they need to balance the risk landscape. Think about it like we've had where, for example, there's obviously something wrong with the data.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
this is not the time to power through. This is the time to pause. Because when you deliver that SAS data set to the FDA, they're also going to look at those data. And and if we are spotting it, of course they are, because they've got all of it.
Right.
We've got a small portion of it. So I think there are times when the desire is to move really fast, but really there's a way to do that that's more structured and feasible. And then there's at least inside of medical writing, I kind of have embraced this idea that more is less
Yeah.
less is better. There's a desire to create something that reads more like a manuscript, but really they're better off if they just tell the story succinctly and let the data tell the story.
Okay.
This isn't a manuscript. There's other opportunities to kind of build more context around the story in a bigger way. So
So what I'm hearing you saying is, well, what I'm hearing you saying is that you use these opportunities to educate your clients on how to do it better. However, what
Mhm.
I didn't hear you say is how they receive it.
Well, They so there's a variety of ways it's received.
Of course.
There are, of course, the smaller companies who they want to go, 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 go. And, when you point out, you can't actually have draft one before you actually have data. Like there are these limitations, there are necessary limitations. And then oftentimes it's like the person who's trying to do the project management hasn't actually performed that specific task. So when you just walk it backwards for them, like, okay, if you have this many documents to review and you have this number of reviewers and the same reviewers are looking at the same documents, you can't have 100% overlap of that review window, or they're going to focus on one or the other and one will be delayed or one will get less attention. Um, so I think sometimes it's a matter of educating them about how to even plan that process piece. Like think about that endpoint. Okay, let's say you do want a submission here, you'd have to have data by here for it even to be feasible.
Right.
And I think too, this is a place where they try to push their own people to,
Mhm.
hey, work nights, work weekends. I've heard about companies that have sequestered people, like check them into a hotel for 3 weeks, and they're just gonna like power on. And I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay, good luck with that. But really, streamlining reviews, thinking about functional reviews. There's ways to get less time out of something, or get something done faster,
Yeah.
and be smart. Um, that would be my best advice. And there are plenty of companies that actually respond to this, and other companies we try to put those guardrails into the proposals. Like, hey, this is the amount of time it takes,
Yeah.
and a woman cannot 10 women cannot be pregnant for a month and have a baby. You need to have there are things that just take time and have a reasonable sequence.
Yeah. So let's talk about putting your best foot forward. And this is a
Okay.
conversation that I just want to be clear, we're stepping into hornet's nest as we start talking about it. Not
Okay.
because it should be hornet's nesty, but it is because of the way the country is divided.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about how you bring your best version of yourself to work. And we
Okay.
talked about that doing remote work. We talked about that in the context of sort of bringing our having downtime. But now in terms of actually showing up,
Okay.
this month is Pride. So you
Okay.
have your LGBTQ employees that are coming up. They're showing up. They're being who they need to be and want to be and are. But we've seen and not only are we respecting them, but encouraging them. And there's been this groundswell, if you will, around companies taking a role and saying you've got one set of companies coming in saying, we really support this whole process. We really want you to be part of it. I'm not really picking on pride this moment as much as I'm picking on just being authentically you and whatever that means.
Okay.
And what I think I'm blanking on the company, but one of the companies basically came out and said, we don't want any political talk within our company. Because there's not a space for it. We just don't want it because it's not going to, we think you should focus on work, and that's great. That went spectacularly.
I was going to say, how'd that go?
I think they had something I'm making up numbers here, but 50 employees and 25 quit.
Oh my God.
It was crazy.
So what you're saying is that didn't go well.
No, not so much. Not so much. But when you're trying to develop a policy for a company like Whitsell Innovations, how are you going in and saying, do you draw a line at business? Do you draw a line at being authentically you? Do you draw a line at employee welfare? How do you sort of come up with something that says, this is what our ideology is as a company?
Okay. I don't know. That's a great question. I think part of it is I know where I personally stand, like Robin Whitsell. I know where I stand. And I think there are certain places where we have to be authentic, or we don't make sense anymore. Divesting Robin from Whitsell Innovations doesn't make sense. But there are other places where I can make choices about how to do that. So I'll give you an example. There might be how I specifically feel about Pride Month, which, spoiler alert, I'm all about it. I feel like people should be able to bring their authentic selves to work. And I think
but hold on.
We've seen...
You say people should be able to bring their authentic self to work. Are you saying that as Robin Whitsell the person or Robin Whitsell president?
So I'm saying that as Robin Whitsell person.
Okay.
And I probably would say that as Robin Whitsell president too, but let me go on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get on, I'm not going to go on Twitter and just start making blanket statements about things. Again, maybe I'm stepping on a hornet's nest by saying that, but I think my Twitter account really is just mostly business, and our pets, and take your dog to work day, orange cat day, maybe coffee day. I mean, well, I'll call out some of that stuff. So it tends to be a little bit more vanilla. I think one of the exceptions is we did put out a corporate statement last year about some of the civil unrest that was going on and the
Mm-hmm.
health inequities that it brought to light.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, and I did have a few people that expressed concern, like maybe we're just jumping on a bandwagon by saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had to listen to and weigh all of those concerns, and then basically went back to the leadership of the company and said, okay, let's make a go and no go decision here. And pretty much I was like, we look at enough data to see what health disparities look like. We look at enough clinical trials to understand what health disparities look like.
Yeah.
I'm very involved with the Diversity Alliance for Science. So I think, and I think as our company, I think has benefited from that relationship. So I think to not be willing to articulate that as a value seems off to me. So that was a place where we did. And if we should be like reconsidering, like to what degree do we say, hey, it's Pride Month? I think it's okay to say, yay, it's Pride Month. Or, you know, I, I mean,
So
but you're right. Maybe I need like a more like specific policy. I don't
who
know.
knows? Who knows? I guess when you're making that decision, what I'm hearing you say is you make the decision on a case by case basis. Is that fair?
Probably.
Okay. When you're making that decision on a case by case basis, do you have a certain company motto or a company? I don't want to use the word policy, but effectively a constitution of the company that you go back to and you look at and you go, these are the values of our company, and
Sure.
does this line up with the values of our company, or do you go, what do we think about this leadership of the company, and let's get a emotional sort of where we are right now feel for it? Like how do you make those decisions?
Um, that's a lot to unpack. So there's a couple things, right? So there's how much skin we have in that game, right?
Uh-huh.
There's how much of it that really is even our remit. So
Uh-huh.
I think being thoughtful about where you even open your mouth is important, right?
Yep.
So there are places where it's probably not our place to talk about something, or we don't have the expertise. We might not know what we don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think looking at something and saying, why is it important to us to express something
Mm-hmm.
is pretty sound way to look at things. And I think we go back to our mission, which is about supporting the life science community with integrity.
Right.
Are we living that mission? We have very clear values inside the company that have to do with things like family first and getting the science right, and um, communicating those values. And then customer service. Are we serving our customers? And if our customers are patients, are we serving them appropriately? So I think, yeah, you have to align everything. I get the expression "your true north" is like maybe cliche at this point, but I think there is a good opportunity to use those values as your true north, as knowing that you're going in the right direction. Wait, which if I can jump off from that,
Yeah.
I had asked you about if you have books that you read or things that you explore to help you with making decisions and going a different direction. And our company has a book club, and we're
Mm-hmm.
reading this book called Think Again.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of the points of the book is kind of having, and I love that they call it a scientific mindset, like asking questions, testing hypotheses. How do you know what is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think in a case of something like this, like having a policy around a statement about pride, I think that's an opportunity to think like a scientist. Look at like, well, why do you need to put out that statement? Why you? Um,
So let me
are you
challenge you.
inserting yourself where you belong or don't belong? It gives you a chance to think and rethink.
Let me challenge you on that,
Okay.
because I'd be a terrible lawyer if I didn't. Uh,
That
but
lawyer
let's.
piece every time. Gets me every time.
uh, no, but you're talking about should we insert ourselves in a place that maybe we don't have the expertise for, and I think that's a Very valid thought process, without a doubt.
Mhm.
But some might argue that sometimes you're not standing up because you think that it's your place, but because you think it's unfair. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Should I'm fully unaware, just to be very clear about this. I know nothing about the demographics in Alaska or Iowa.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's 99.999% white American people, for argument's sake. But should they put out a policy or a statement around Black Lives Matter? Or is that not their role? Or do you go, this is what we believe is inherently fair, inherently a point of being who we are as a state. So I guess in the same way,
so
as a go ahead. I'm trying to translate that. In a company, based on what I've seen, you have a pretty diverse company anyway, so you can't really argue on that point. But my point being, in that scenario, would you go, if you weren't as diverse as you were, would the argument be we're not appropriately positioned, we don't have the knowledge base to talk about Black Lives Matter at all? Or is it more, and we understand health disparities, therefore we will talk about health disparities. So is it more about what you talk about because of your expertise, or should you stand up for inherent fairness, if you will? Does that make sense?
Maybe. Maybe I'm answering the does it make sense question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, there's sort of the value statement around it, like where it's appropriate for you to insert yourself. I mean, not every great thought that wanders through Robin Whitsell's head, talking about myself in the third person, needs to be shared, right? So, like, I could have, oh, I love this idea, and it's not necessarily the smartest way to go for the company.
Sure.
So, and another example, I'm not LGBTQ, though I would consider myself an ally. So
there you go. That's a great example. Yeah.
Do I get to insert, like, my beliefs on other people? And because I know there are people for whom they're putting it out there because it's marketing, right? Like, it's good marketing. Oh, look at us, we're doing, and I feel really troubled around that. So yeah, I think it's asking yourself why. Like, what's the reason for inserting yourself in the conversation?
So being mindful about where you are and what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Let me, you know how we usually end this. So do you have any question for the audience based on what we've discussed?
Yeah. So I wanted your audience to chime in with some of the books they've read that have influenced them, or what they're reading now that's interesting. I think I don't, and it might be science fiction. My husband, because we were on vacation, just finished a book that he had read as a kid, and he's like, "Wow, this book was really good, and it was even better than I remember it being." And I thought, that's a cool thing to learn about something, and it's a good opportunity to sort of intellectually engage in a place that might be adjacent to what you do as opposed to exactly what you do. So I want to hear recommendations and advice or thoughts around that.
Okay, I always try to answer the first question myself. I'm going to try to see. I listen to audiobooks. I'm trying to see which audiobook I was listening to. So give me 1 second.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks too.
I don't have the patience anymore to read on my own. Come on, what was I reading? Sorry. There we go. How to Talk to Anyone is tricks for big success in relationships.
How to Talk to Anyone.
Yep, and that's the one I'm listening to right now.
What's the secondary?
Hold on.
Something to success.
Little tricks for big success.
Little tricks for big success. Okay. So, what do you like about it? What is it teaching you?
So far, it's teaching me that I'm smiling right. That's what it's told me so far. So it turns out the big point they were making is don't smile at everyone.
Oh,
If you go from smiling at everyone to sort of smiling when they sort of make their point, people feel like that smile that is valued more. And apparently that's true according to the book, more for women than for men, because women naturally smile more and men
okay.
naturally frown more. So men get taken seriously, allegedly, according to the book.
Ah,
So
I need
so
to
when women
practice like more of a stern face is what you're
no,
telling
but see what you just did, where you practice with a stern face and then your smile sort of keeps coming out.
me.
Then I'm like, I made a point. That was a good point. Robin liked that point, as opposed to
Gotcha.
Robin likes me. So
So wait, what you're saying is if I'm smiling at you, you don't know whether I'm agreeing with your point or if I just like you as a human being.
there you go. There you go.
Gotcha.
So
All right.
that's how far I've gotten so far. I need to
Okay.
read. So that was the question for the audience. Here's a
Yep.
question, questions for you. What was the best thing that happened to you this week that started a day ago, I guess, but this week?
So Monday was Memorial Day,
Yeah.
and that was the day my husband and I went golfing, and it was
That is such a highlight for you.
so awesome. We were so bad, but I think part of 20 years is that this is a person that I spent a lot of time laughing with, and we can laugh at ourselves and and laugh at each other, and it's actually kind of awesome. And so that was really a highlight of my week. And I think I'm always keen on being outside and in nature, and that was really it was a beautiful course, and like what's not to love except for how truly terrible we played. Um, but yeah, that would be the highlight of my week.
Okay.
That was
And
Monday.
what challenged you in the last week?
What challenged me last week? Well, that started also Monday.
Well, last week,
Okay.
not this week, but yeah, give them
Um,
more time.
so I would say what's challenging me now is we're really busy and trying to balance busy with again not getting burnt out, trying to keep focused on how to be able to remain doing our best work, and that's critical.
Yeah.
Um, and I think too, like medical writers in our responsibility gene, we have to think about some of the boundaries that we need to put in place and how to communicate those boundaries successfully. So maybe that's one of your little tricks for big success I need to hit you up on. How to successfully communicate things like boundaries, things like this is what makes sense for you as a project, but also me as a human being.
There you go. I will do a quick summary. Today we landed up talking about your 20th anniversary. We talked about working from vacation. We then talked a little bit about how do you manage expectations from clients, whether they're investors, public companies, non-investors, and seeing sort of how much skin in the game they have and evaluating sort of helping them understand how far in you are. We spoke a little bit about working from vacation. I think we spoke about working from vacation. We spoke about remote work was the next thing we spoke about. We talked a little bit about pride, and we talked a little bit about putting out statements and marketing from it, and when do you put out a statement, what's appropriate. We talked about your book club as well. We talked about how terrible you are at golfing, and we talked about St. Croix and its own experiences around managing tourists. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, fair enough.
Though you did mention you're a lawyer. We should always
I
put
did
that out
mention I'm a
there.
lawyer. Speaking of, nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal or clinical advice of any kind. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. For those of you who missed it, where can they find you, Robin?
Well, they can find me on Twitter at Robin Whitsell. Please grab me there. They can also find me on LinkedIn. Though if they do find me on LinkedIn, please include a little note because people just randomly link to me and I usually just ignore it unless they tell me who they are, or how they found me. So yeah, please do.
And if you need to find me, you can find me on Darshan Talks on Twitter or go to our website, darshantalks.com. If you like this podcast, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Robin. By the way, I should answer one more thing before we hang up. The thing that challenged me this week was trying to log into this podcast forever.
That was terrifying, actually, because it was like just me, like standing there, and I'm like, am I in the right room? Am I leading the podcast today? I had moments. I had a whole symphony of emotions, I gotta tell you.
Well, we'll explore that and more the next time you come on.
Sounds great. Take
Thanks again,
care.
Robin.
Bye.